locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. A little bit of Stones for you there. Time is on my side. Believe it or not, that actually ties in with our show tonight. It's all about time, and it's also about our guest who is from the UK, just like Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. But before we get into tonight's exciting information, which I can't wait to share with you, I'd like to remind you that if you'd like to review this show later, you can visit the archives at inceptionradionetwork.com, and you can also catch them on iTunes and Stitcher. There's other ways to listen to the show live, and there's other ways to get it later on. So please log on to inceptionradionetwork.com, and we will absolutely, you'll see all the list of all the things, and I see MJ's just signaling me that it's also available on YouTube, so that's wonderful. No excuse for missing your Night Vision Radio or any show on Inception Radio Network. So tonight, boy, this is a subject that's rather new to me, although, of course, it's a familiar symbol. We're talking about the Celtic Cross, and we're talking with author, researcher Crichton Miller, and he has made some discoveries about what we just assumed was a gravestone marker or a religious symbol of some kind generally, but I find that there's always something behind things that people make or come up with, and that certainly seems like the case with the Celtic Cross. Welcome to the show, Crichton Miller.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Well, I really appreciate it, and good morning to you. Again, I've interrupted someone's sleep and rest in order to provide us with this great information. So we sure appreciate your efforts in your research, and as well for joining us here tonight, or this morning for you, as the case may be. Now, you have a new book out. It's called The Golden Thread of Time. And it's really about this symbol and what you discovered about this symbol. It's not just a symbol. It's not just religious. There's a much older meaning, and it's actually a device. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I discovered the device in 1997 and got 2 British patents on it in 2000 and 2001 as a device for astronomy, navigation, and surveying. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Now, how was it that you initially came up with this idea? What that prompted you to create this device that's fashioned on the Celtic Cross? How did you get to that point? I imagine there was a lot of years in between the time the idea struck you to start researching this and until you actually created your own device.
The creation of my own device was for a purpose, scientific purpose. The concept behind having a theory is that you then make a model. So that's what I did. I had a theory, then I made a model, and then I set it out to peer group review. And then I went for patenting, because patenting is commercial. And commercially, it's the toughest type of review you can have, because if it's obvious or somebody's invented it before, you can't get a patent on it.
That's right.
So not a lot of people realize that.
But that also means that it had to already be working, because they wouldn't patent. We say patent here in the United States. Please forgive us.
That's right.
They wouldn't issue a patent on something that didn't work. So you must have had to prove to them that it worked somehow.
Absolutely, and that's at the back of the book. The whole patent application and all the working drawings are at the back of the book. The idea about a patent is that somebody can remotely reconstruct and use the patented material, and so that's what you can do. So what you have is a universal patent that proves that an item works and shows how to construct it and use it. So that's quite important, because it was issued by the British Patent Office, and I was awarded 2 patents, because I did one on the Celtic Cross, but I also did the other designs. And all the other designs also apply in ancient history. What I found after that was, having done a total of 20 years of research, is that the Celtic Cross itself, the design, is associated with ships, and it's international. And it's probably Neolithic in origin, which really throws history on its head when you understand that it's so accurate in its measurements that it allows you to find your position on the planet within 3 nautical miles, which is within sight of the horizon. That's both latitude and longitude.
And it's so funny. We see so many things now that we kind of pass by, we look at, and they don't really mean anything to us other than the obvious. But it seems like it's just like in language. We sort of say words, but we don't really think about the meaning of the words that we're saying. And when you mentioned the word horizon right then, it struck me, because we don't think of the true meaning of that word, which I heard you explain in one of your documentaries. So could you...
Yeah, that's right on the button. Horizon, the Egyptian god of time was called Horus. The anagram of that is hours, and zone means belt. So in translation, what we're really talking about is the belt of time. The belt of time is the zodiac.
Oh, I see.
So if we take that further now, then you can now translate. Now, I should say this, what you said about words is so important. Nearly every secret that's available to mankind is written down somewhere. And one of the best places is a college dictionary. So if we look up the name, because we're looking at the etymology of the word as well. So temple comes from tiempo, which means place of time.
Oh.
What a lot of people don't realize is that church is the same, because church is an Old English word derived from kirk. And kirk means to rule, to measure. But the combination word means measurer of circles. So,
really?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's in any dictionary. Well, not any dictionary, not the online ones, because they're a little bit dumbed down. But if you get a good college dictionary, then you can see the translation of those words. So church comes from kirk. Kirk means ruler. And ruler is what we in England, I don't know if it's the same in the US, use at school to measure things.
Yes, we absolutely do.
Yeah. So a ruler, now that also means a king or royalty. So it rules. Okay, a king rules. And that word is about measure, the measure of law, the measure of distance, the measure of money, the measure of land. And so all of these things are actually in the dictionary, and they're also in some of the holy books. So the answer to what our ancestors did is in plain view, but we don't see it, which says something about our psychology, what's happened to us.
Now, you say that this device has been around since Neolithic times.
Yeah.
And when, we probably think of people as, not too sophisticated, but yet this is a fairly simple device, but it was brilliant that they were able to figure it out. You also indicated that in order for them to have been able to successfully use this device, they would have had to known at that time that the Earth was round.
That's correct.
So,
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I was just thinking, and I was having a conversation with a friend about this afternoon, and I was thinking, well, we all know the stories about Galileo and how he was regarded as a heretic because he was saying that the world was round and not flat. And, it never made a lot of sense to me why the church, why that would be a heretical idea.
But, I love it. Oh, you're right on the button again.
Is it that they didn't want us to know this? So like everything else, they scared us away from it.
Sure. Let me explain something about, let's go back to patenting. Okay. Now, the first patent ever granted was it was in the 14th century AD. And before that, there was a thing called royal assent. So what that really means is that anything that was good for the king or the ruler or royalty and good for society, they would then issue a royal decree on it, securing it for the person who invented it. Later, we invented patenting. And prior to patenting, there was no protection for people's livelihood. So what happened was they formed guilds and secret societies. So if you were a carpenter, or you were a mason, or you were anything that was useful to society, then you would have a secret society in which you swore to keep the secrets of your trade. Now, to defend that before patenting, if you crossed the line, you could end up in a violent situation. So when you look back at the terrible things that were done to people who stepped too far against the rulership or the control, then you're talking about people being burnt at the stake, all of this sort of thing, excommunicated. In other words, they weren't afraid of death, but they were afraid of losing their souls. So there were terrible threats put upon people that might have bucked the system. And so that's what we saw in the case of Da Vinci and Galileo. They were all in difficulty over the things that they were saying. So we have a basic thing. We know, let me just take you to how true it would be that they knew the world was round. The Egyptians, Mesopotamians, they all invented the idea of astrology, or what we would call, before it was named astrology, primitive astronomy. The most important thing to understand about that is that they were able to say what your birth sign was. And they were able to do that 2,000 or 3,000 years ago when they built the pyramids. Now, that doesn't seem much, except that you must understand that your birth sign is the sign in which the sun is in on the day that you were born. Now, common sense will tell you if you walk out and look at the sky at the sun in a sign, you can't see it.
Sure.
You get that?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you can't see it, how could they see it? And how they could see it was that they could look at night sky, okay, at midnight 12 hours before and know where the sun was at noon in daylight. Consequently, they knew that they were on a revolving planet which looked out into space at one stage and then looked in towards the sun during the day.
And
so there you have the proof in the fact that astrology was used, that they knew the world was round.
yeah,
So when we come to the Celtic Cross is a circle with 4 spokes. Each of the spokes represents the 4 seasons of the year. And they also represent the 4 parts of the day: morning, morning, afternoon, evening, night. So it really is a model of the solar system that they made an instrument out of. It's a copy. It's in alchemic terms, you would say, as above, so below.
yes.
What is in heaven is on earth. The same as it says in the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, let your kingdom come on earth. It's the same meaning. So the Celtic Cross.
And didn't you say something, or was that the 23rd Psalm, about something that was in there that related to,
Surely.
oh, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow
That's
of death.
Psalm 23.4.
Yes.
That's because it's a number in the Bible, which is the number of our life. It's life on earth. You see, the earth is tilted 23.4 degrees. And so as it goes through the year, through the circle of the outside of the Celtic Cross, or if you like, through the circle, it tilts away from the sun in the winter in the north. And then at the equinox, the earth lies horizontal to the sun. And then in the summer, the earth is tilted towards the center of the sun. But the tilt is 23.4 degrees.
And,
So that's
what is the meaning of what follows? It says, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Is that a reference to this device, or?
Absolutely. And the reason is what people don't realize is the word rod actually means a ruler. It's a measuring stick. It comes from Egyptian word for reed, and a reed is a segmented piece of grass, which they used to measure with. So reed became rod. And in Scotland, rod became rood, and rood means cross.
Oh.
Holy Rood is the Scottish Parliament and the Queen's place in Edinburgh, and it's called the Holy Rood, meaning the holy measuring stick. So it's an ancient word for measurement is rood, and so is rod.
Wow.
And that is in any dictionary. You can find that on Wikipedia if you want. Just put the meaning of rood, the meaning of rod in, and it will tell you it's in one hand that it's a cross, and the other hand that it's a measuring stick.
You know, so, when I heard that reference made about the rod and the staff, in my mind I thought, okay, that's 2 sticks, and so cross them and they make a cross.
Absolutely, but one stick is a measuring stick, and the other is a staff to mount it on.
Yes.
Everything's in the Bible, but we can't understand that because we don't understand that all civilizations on the planet, prehistoric civilizations, were based on astrology. The Maya, the Chinese, the Egyptians, they're all astrological societies, and our whole concepts in religion descend from that.
Now, you know,
it's a powerful instrument.
Well, it seems to be, and you know, as you said, you know, it's about time and being able to keep time and measure time and space, I guess.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we hear a lot. A few weeks ago, we did a show on the Great Cross at On Day, and you know, what's or so-called apocalyptic cross of On Day. Is there a relation, because there seems to be an indication of time on that cross, or at least according to people's interpretation, and there seems to also be a relationship between that cross and the clock, and it's failing me what the name of the church is in Cornwall, that has the clock that says, watch and pray, time hastes away. And I guess there must be some indicator that points to this clock or something like that. At least some people have made that connection. Is this all part and parcel of the same thing?
Yes. The apocalyptic literally means revelation.
Of course. Yes.
So the cross when it comes, okay, is a revelation. And we expect to have things revealed to us. That's what we're promised.
Yes.
So what's revealed to us is the nature of time.
Wow.
And our place in the universe. And our ancestors knew the nature of time, although science is still seeking it now. So what's happening is science is seeking the nature of time and the answer to everything, whereas our ancestors already knew.
Yes.
And it's very powerful. So the first lines of Genesis, when you read the Bible, mentions the 3 sixes. So God made the earth in 6 days, and the morning and the evening were the first day. So 6 days times 6 hours times 6 hours is 3 sixes.
Mm.
Yeah. So the very first line in the Bible that with the number that people are supposed to be afraid of reveals all the mathematical numbers of the universe.
Well, that's another example then possibly of, they made something that was useful and that had been used. They made it evil so that we would stay away from it. Who's going to associate with the 666 if they think that it's the mark of the beast?
Here be dragons. They used to put on the old charts on the sailing routes to America, so that the other people wouldn't go on their trade routes. Here be dragons. Exactly the same thing. The knowledge of keeping time was power. It tells you when to have your festivals. It tells you when to go to work, when to stop work. And the ancient people were in an agricultural society after the end of hunter-gathering. In the agricultural society, wherein they required people to behave in a way that was controlled.
Mm.
And
Yes.
the common people were enslaved. So they were completely controlled and enslaved and lived in mostly poverty. I'm going to talk about the masses. And the reason for America being formed was that the Europeans were under such oppression that they left, found a new land.
Yes.
And the oppression that was put on by controlling time, the timekeepers, the watchers, as they used to be called.
Wow.
Okay, so the watchers have always been there. Stonehenge is a clock. The Great Pyramids are a clock. And the Great Pyramids encompass exactly the same numbers as the Bible.
Wow.
But people can't see it, completely blind to it.
Well, we hear that all the time. It's laid out on the earth for us to see, but we just don't see it.
We don't see it because genetically we've had generations of being controlled.
Yes.
And there's another thing called belief. Now, belief is another one that can be read in the Bible. What are your beliefs? In the dictionaries. Belief means by love, implying without knowledge.
Mm.
Do you believe in God? No, I know there's a God.
Mm.
So religion is another one. Religion means it comes from the Latin, ligere, from which the word ligature is known. So it means to be tied, to be bound. But it means more than that. It means to be rebound, retied. So people say to me, are you religious? And I say, no, I'm not religious because I'm not tied. But they assume that I mean that I don't believe that there's a greater spirit, a creator spirit. So they assume that because I say I'm not religious. But then they don't understand the words they use or the words I say.
Right. Well, certainly there was something before religion ever came about,
Well, we insult our ancestors when we say that they worship the sun. You see,
Yes.
they didn't worship the sun, they used the sun.
Mm.
In hunter-gathering times, if you were hunter-gatherers like the modern Eskimo, they go off, and in their skin boats. And the young Eskimos, even now, can travel 1,800 miles in the summer. And what they do is they used those in ancient times. You use the skin boats as houses. So they would sail the boat, drag it up on the land, turn it upside down. You got a house. And what they did is they followed the herds and the seasons. So they would travel north and south, depending, just like the animals. But to do that, they had to understand where they were going and where they had to be, which is what we call now logistics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Logistics is what gets the food on the shelves. Now, I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. That's what I do. I make sure that all the goods are on the shelves for Asda, which is Walmart, and Tesco's over here, and the big retailers, cement and so forth. That's what I do. So the idea behind logistics, which is a black art, is to get something to a place, or something or somebody to a place at the right time. And to do it, you need to manipulate time and speed and distance. Our ancestors, when they were doing hunter-gathering, where their tribes were moving about the face of the earth, were exactly the same. They had to know when the fish were running in a particular area, or when nuts were to be collected in their season in the north. And then they would flee off back down to the south again to keep warm. The last Indians that made, the last Red Indians that made canoes did that. They traveled through the Great Lakes down south with their families and then came back up north again in the summer.
Yes.
We completely forgotten because we live in a world of airplanes and trains and buses.
And settlements.
Sure, that 12,000 years ago or even less, the only way to get about was by sea or river.
Yes.
And so we just do not understand or have any idea of what was needed. So when they needed those things, they needed to be able to tell time, and they needed to be able to measure the position of the Earth to achieve what they did. And
Wow.
And of course, diffusion is all about that. We know now that that we're now starting to find that the genetics of the Chinese were in the west coast of America, and the arguments on the Solutrean points and the handling of spear points and so forth shows that there was an interaction between across the Atlantic between Europe and America. We know that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
we know that for a fact.
But they did
And
that
long before Columbus. Long before
absolutely.
Columbus.
Yeah. And fishermen were fishing off the banks in America from Europe long before Columbus as well. So,
Wow.
but this is a political issue.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. But
Yeah.
Crichton, we're going to have to stop right here, take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about the Celtic Cross, its relationship to cultures across time and people like the Knights Templar. So
Yeah.
we'll be right back. Welcome back to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett. And if you're just joining us, we are talking tonight with author Crichton Miller about his new book, Golden Thread of Time, and all the implications that brings. We're talking mainly about the Celtic Cross used by the ancients as a navigational device and a device for measuring time and space. So, oh my goodness, this just covers everything, doesn't it? I don't know, Crichton, if you saw my Facebook page today, but I posted a picture of my favorite Poussin painting, and it is Time and Truth, or Time Saving Truth. And to me, that image, which depicts, I guess, Father Time, a white-haired, although very muscular man, holding in his arms and lifting up a figure of a woman, and they're sort of flying upwards. And to me, that has always said to me that, in time, the truth will come out, the truth will be saved, because some people call that that painting, Time Saving Truth. And it also sort of brings to mind the Gospel of Thomas verse that, paraphrasing part of it, says something that nothing that's covered up will remain, that there's nothing covered up that won't be uncovered. And but it's interesting because now I'm looking at it a little bit differently, time and truth, because the truth is about time.
Yes, it is.
So now I'm going to look at that painting with a little bit of a different eye, I think. But it's really interesting. It really doesn't contradict what I thought before, but it sort of enhances it a little bit. So it's, that's sort of the way it feels with these discoveries that you're making. It's always been there. It's been hidden and it's been buried in our consciousness or in the, social consciousness. And now it's coming out again.
Yes.
It's being uncovered again.
It's a kind of resurrection.
It is.
And that's true of everything. Nothing can be hidden forever. Time will always turn it back up again because time is not as we experience it. We have to experience time in a kind of linear way. And so we think about the past and we think about the future we're going towards. Whereas our ancestors didn't think about time in that way. And the cross reveals that. They thought of time as being, if you like, time as just changes. So everything is static, but it just changes. And we measure the changes. And that's quite hard to get your head around.
It is.
But it's easily experimented with. And you can do that. And I do that in my book. I say, well, what you do is you hear a jet plane go over, but you see the jet plane is not in the same place as the sound is coming from. In the same way that what you're doing is then you're hearing something that's in the past, but also you're looking at something that's in the past. So you're looking at a jet plane or a star in the sky. You're only seeing what was there long ago as the light signals come to your eye as you receive the light. So you're looking at the past, but that's true of your own finger. If you touch your own nose with your own finger, the signal goes from your finger up your arm and into your brain, tells you you've touched your nose. So even your finger's in the past as far as your perceptions are concerned.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and now they understood that. And so in understanding that, they know more than our modern science people do. They're still stumbling out of the restrictions of the church and the great franchise, as I like to call it. What I mean by the great franchise is there was a deal done after Constantine with the kings of Europe that they would pay to the church a certain amount of money from their taxes to be part of that franchise. So it was a bigger franchise than McDonald's. So the rulers knew about how to measure time and control it, but the people didn't. So now science is struggling to catch up to what was once already known. Tremendous damage done to humanity.
Oh, absolutely.
But we kicked it over. The ordinary people kicked over the traces, and then they became free. And that was the idea behind America. And it was also what caused most of the kings and queens of Europe to be deposed or murdered in the case of the French Revolution. But the people then, being free, went absolutely nuts and slaughtering each other by millions to fight out into a sense of being free, as we are free now. But we're not free because our minds are still tied.
That's right.
We free our bodies. We have freedom of speech. Otherwise, I couldn't talk to you on the radio at the moment. We have freedom of speech. But what about our minds?
Well, we're imprisoned. I've always said, people talk about in these days and sort of the new age, I guess, term of awakening. I don't liken it to an awakening so much as a breaking out of jail.
It's like a breaking out of jail in a lot of ways, surely. There are thinkers and there are seekers, but they're few and far between.
I mean, and we're so programmed. I mean, whether we're religious or not, we're still subject to whatever programming that we
Wow.
had.
Well,
And
let's talk about religion for a second, because I covered that earlier. The word religious means to be tied.
Yes.
So if you're an atheist, you're religious. If you're a scientist, you're religious. If you believe in Darwin or modernism, you're a religious person because you're tied to that belief.
Yes.
So to be truly sovereign, which is the first line of my book, I am a sovereign soul, is I'm tied to nothing. No, and faith is another word. If you look in the dictionary, faith means to follow a man. Why would I follow a man? Everybody's as flawed as I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel that holds true for things like joining secret orders and things like that? I've always just had that gut instinct naturally, and have never joined any organizations because I felt like that if I did, I would have to have some allegiance to that
Yes.
organization, and it might be an organization that I really find interesting, and maybe I do agree with a lot of what they stand for. But what if I didn't? Would I be free, or would I acquiesce to the group?
You would
And
have
so-
to acquiesce.
I would think so. So
Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't be part of the group, would you?
So, yeah. So just instinctively, and then of course, originally I used to do news on the radio, newscaster. So I felt that as a journalist, it wouldn't be right for me to be affiliated with any organizations or anything like that would slant me one way or the other. But then just in my life, I'm no longer a journalist. I mean, I consider this show not to be journalism, but just sort of infotainment, I guess you might want to call it. And but I still hold that gut feeling that I have to stay free.
Yes. And you're doing that. And that's absolutely right. If you join, you have to acquiesce. But then you're a human being, and that means life being human. Human being is life being human. And so life is existence in all sorts of ways and shapes and forms within our planet and perhaps the universe. And so we are life being human, and that's about as much attachment as I would want to give to anything.
Yes, yes. Now, when we were on the break, you and I were talking, and I had recalled something that I had heard you say regarding Eve in the Garden of Eden and the
Sure.
so-called apple, or the fruit of the forbidden tree of knowledge.
Yeah. Can I
Could
just
you-
tell you about that?
Please.
First, what we have to understand is that our religions come from astrology. The first Genesis 1 verse 14 tells you that God put the sun and the moon in the stars and the stars in the sky, and signs, the stars to be signs, from which we would tell the days and the weeks and the years. That's not an exact translation, but if you look at Genesis 14, you'll see the word is signs. So we now know that it's an astrological society that this teaching came from. So when we look at astrology, there's the ecliptic plane. Now that's very much in the news at the moment because Pluto is sitting in Sagittarius and we've just done a flyby. So
Yeah.
it's very, very important. So Sagittarius, each of the signs is 30 degrees long. Starts with Orion, the right hand of Orion, travels around 360 degrees. And that is a circle of man-made signs in which the sun sits in the middle, and we travel around and see it night and day, night and day, night and day as we go around our orbit on the planet. So now we know that it's an astrological teaching. We now can look at the story of Eve. And so in the story of Eve, it's the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So a fruit is a product. So it's a product of a tree of knowledge. which means that when they wrote that, it was already a tree of knowledge. It was knowledge that had come down to them when they wrote the Bible. So we're looking at the fruit of a tree of knowledge. But it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, we in modern terms can look at our scientific ways and say that the world is made up of opposing forces. Those opposing forces are creation on one hand and destruction on the other, if you choose. Or you could say it's of order and chaos. And chaos, of course, is entropy. So what we're saying is that changes of time, okay, are created by the tension between good and evil, or order and chaos. Constant changes caused by conflict. Why we learned that, and what gave us that, was the astrological sign of Draconis in the North Pole. Draconis is the serpent, the dragon. It's seen in every religion in the Northern Hemisphere, ancient ones, including Hindu religions and so forth, as a serpent called Orbeus, which is the serpent eating its own tail. So as the Earth spins every day, the serpent spins like the face of a clock. And as we go throughout the year, in the night sky, we see the serpent Draconis spinning very slowly, just slightly less than 1 degree a day at midnight. But that was our clock. So what we did with that is we brought that down and we made it into a mechanical clock in the 14th century. And you can see that on the 24-hour clock at Horloge, which is interesting because that's where the Astronomical Society gathers to discuss whether or not Pluto was a planet.
Uh-huh.
It's all pretty much tied up because they know the roots of these things in a lot of ways. So the fruit of the tree of knowledge of order and chaos is if you plant a seed at the right time of year, then you'll get a fruit from it. If you know anything about how to plan time, then you will receive fruit from that knowledge. And fruit, to give you an example, a motor car is the fruit of a tree of knowledge going all the way back to the wheel. It's created by millions of people over 6,000 years, experimenting with carts, wheels, mechanics, engineering, horses, all came together until you have a modern motor car. So a motor car is a fruit of a tree of knowledge.
Mm.
Okay? It's simple.
Yes.
So the teaching is quite simple, that if you understand time, it produces a fruit. Hence, you can understand why they protect the knowledge from the common person. Since the common person was there to support and produce the fruit.
Right.
Okay? So that's a material fruit.
Right.
In the sense that if you understand time, it's used even today in speculation on the stock market. If you understand the motions of time, cyclical time, you always buy at the right time and always sell at the right time. It's the same with property. It's only the ones that don't understand time that get caught out, go into negative equity or lose their stocks and shares.
Yes.
So, sorry.
No. I was just going to say, but how? So it would seem like everything is the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Just about everything that's produced.
Yes. So the next thing that we're told about in the Bible after that, because the serpent was guileful.
Yes.
So if you look at the Pharaoh's headdress, the reason for having a serpent sticking out the middle of your forehead and your beard looking like a serpent's body is that you've got serpent knowledge. That's what it means. You're the ruler with serpent knowledge.
And what about this whole idea of a reptilian race? Is that just a sort of bastardization of this whole idea?
Kind of, yeah. Look, we've all got the reptile in us because we come from through that change or train of life being something. So we know that scientifically in part of our brains we have reptilian issues. But that's got nothing to do with what this is about. Rulership, from a serpent point of view, is to understand astrology. And from astrology, understand the nature of time, which means you have to be a measurer.
Yes.
Okay? So if you can measure, you can then control, which is what they did.
And it doesn't seem like it's a particularly complex idea. It almost seems very simple, which...
Yeah, Occam's razor.
Exactly. But yet, we're blind to it.
Yes. That's because perhaps of our fears and fitting in with what our parents taught us and what we were taught at school by teachers. And, the blind end up following the blind.
Yes.
And eventually, if the blind sheep walk off the edge of a cliff as a whole flock just because the first one did. Everything is useful. It doesn't matter whether society is built on a truth or an untruth, providing the society is cemented together by a similar concept. And
yes.
so, but sometimes as time changes, those concepts become redundant. And then they're not good for survival. They're more destructive than they are protective.
Yes.
And that's where we are, as I said earlier, in the last couple of 100 years, we've managed to free ourselves. But we don't know what we've been freed to, because mostly what we've done is deposed and killed the people who had this knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it died with them in the trenches in the First World War and died in the Second World War, as all these families that had this knowledge over the centuries died off. So that even those going around professing they're in secret guilds like Templars and Freemasons, they don't know.
That's right.
And I thought they would know. And I thought the church would know. But they don't. They don't. There's no great conspiracy hidden by people. There's just remnants of those old families still trying to survive in the world.
And who are those families?
Well, I wouldn't name them in that way, but those families that once held power are still trying to survive, while the people who are rising to take their own power are, if you like, starting to find things out.
I don't know, maybe you don't want to name names, or maybe there are just too many to name, but it brings to mind people like the House of Habsburg.
Yeah.
Who were once ruling and trying to come back to rule and seem to have some kind of information or something. There's definitely something going on there.
Well,
is that the type of family you're talking about?
Yeah, this would be the information, but you see the Silesians, the salt traders that made their fortunes in Europe that became the royal families, would have known it. But you also have to remember that many royal families wouldn't necessarily know it because they took by force the kingship. So back in Europe in the old days, the kings and queens were all fighting, killing each other so as to who had the most power. But they would also kill off the knowledge. It's quite standard at every end of every society for the conquering society to get rid of the knowledge of the previous society. It's happening in the world now in the Middle East, where ancient monuments are being destroyed. Oh. The Christians did it, and as well way back when they destroyed Alexandria.
Oh, what a loss to the world that was! Oh my God!
Absolutely.
Can you imagine if we had that library at Alexandria with all that information? So that's why they did it.
Yeah, but everybody in science tends to point most of their stuff to the Greeks in terms of geometry and so forth and philosophy. But of course, as Plato, it wasn't Plato, was it? But somebody, the Egyptian, went to visit the Egyptians, and the Egyptians called the Greeks children. Because Alexander had conquered Egypt and then took over the country, and so it belonged to Greece, which is having a hard time at the moment. And and they claimed it for themselves, but the Egyptians told them they were like children; they knew nothing. And yet we put all our stuff back in this linear concept, and this is where I buck the trend of Darwinistic concept of evolution in terms of it being linear growth, something that banks and politicians play with the words of all the time. I have never seen anything in reality that continues to grow. It reaches its peak and then it doesn't grow anymore, such as oak trees, birds, every living thing that you can see. There is no continuous growth. There's only cycles. Egyptians knew that. In the philosophy of the Greeks, they also knew that.
Wow,
So it's powerful. It's very simple. The cross is a very simple measuring instrument, but it's completely geometric. And in sense of it's spherically geometric. But geometry means it comes from measuring Mother Earth. Geo, Earth, metry, Mother, mater. That's what it means.
Wow, you really have to pay attention to the words, don't you?
Yes, and that's the point. In English, we do not, and we used to, as children, get told off by our parents, don't make new words up, use the proper words, or we won't be able to understand you.
Yes.
So words have precise meanings, and most human beings don't find that out till they're standing in front of a judge. Lawyers use the precision of words. And
that's right.
That's the rule of law.
That's right. That's right. I spent a lot of time in another life, actually part of this life, working in the world of law. And my job consisted of partly of drafting legal agreements. And every single word and punctuation was important.
Absolutely. It is. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Everything is either in the ancient holy books, or it's carved in stone, or it's in a dictionary.
Yes.
It's no great secret, and the churches put it in full view as well. You go into any of the old cathedrals in Europe, and it's laid out on the zodiac. So if you go to Santiago de Compostela, you'll see Mother Mary standing on the moon with her foot on the serpent's head, meaning Mother Church controls time. And if you stand under the cross part, because the cathedral's laid out as a cross, and look up at the dome ceiling, you'll see a pyramid with the eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye.
Which, of course, we use on our dollar bill here, or our money.
Absolutely. And Horus is time. Time and money are actually the same thing.
Yeah, so, the Spanish word for hours is horas, Horas, which very easily ties back to Horus. We're right at break time again. This is going by so quickly. And when we come back, we're going to get more into this idea of the Celtic Cross as a navigation device and how it might have been used or maybe even discovered by the Knights Templar during their time. So hang in there with us, and we'll be right back with Crichton Miller. Thank you for hanging in there with us. You're listening to Night Vision Radio. We're talking with Crichton Miller and about the information contained in his new book, Golden Thread of Time, and primarily about the Celtic Cross and how it was actually much more than just a religious symbol that we know it as. It was actually a device for navigation and time. So, oh goodness, I wanted to get into the Templars a little bit in this last half hour, if we could. And, it seems that the Templars, their sort of stated raison d'etre was to go, I guess, accompanying pilgrims on the path to Jerusalem to protect them. But
Sure.
everyone knows that that wasn't really the only reason that they were there, and that they were found to have been digging under the temple and things like that. So, was it this device that they were looking for? Did they find it, and was that how they were able to navigate
I
the
believe
oceans?
I believe so, and I write about that in my book in some depth.
Good.
But again, let's go back to the word Templar. It comes from time, so really their real name is Knights of Time.
That just blew my
That's-
mind when you were talking about temple earlier, and I was thinking temple, Templar. Oh my gosh, of course. Time.
Yeah, Knights of Time. And you see, the thing is, our ancestors saw God as time. They didn't see God as the sun. If you go to Egypt, they state that quite clearly. And this is what probably the Templars found out or rediscovered, is that if you look at Amun-Ra, it means the sun in the moment of Aries. Amun, as in the end of the Lord's Prayer, Amen. That's what it means. So Tutankhamun means Tut, meaning wisdom, and Ankh, meaning life. So it's of Amun, or Aries. So he was the representative of God on earth as the Pharaoh, as the life and wisdom of the age of Aries, the creative moment of the sun in time.
Mm.
And it's so obvious. So what you have, and this is really important, is that Amun was a ram and represented the sign of Aries, which lasted 2,160 years. After that, it's the age of the fish, which is Pisces. And so Jesus found fishermen to go out and catch the souls of the age of Pisces. And that's why if you look at the Pope's hat, you see it's a fish's head.
All right.
Mouth open. So the whole Christian faith is built on the sign of the fish, which lasts 2,160 years and still is in existence today. We're still at the spring equinox, the sun rises in the sign of Pisces before it goes into Aquarius. And if you go back to what I was saying, you have to understand that all societies, all ancient societies, including the Chinese society, were built on astrology. In the Chinese, instead of using the Celtic Cross, used the Luopan. And the Luopan is what we use in a very shallow way today to do Feng Shui. But the ancients hung a plumb line from the center of the Luopan and could measure the heavens, measure astrology. They were the wise ones, the wizards, the wise ones.
Yes. Now that brings up a question that we just got via the chat room from Red, who says, "Do we see the Celtic Cross anywhere else but Europe? Is it seen in Africa or the New World, for example?"
Yeah. The Celtic Cross is the Amerindians, wheel. You know the
medicine wheel.
Your medicine wheel. That's exactly the same thing.
Mm.
So
And
you talk about worldwide civilization based on astrology and animism and shamanistic views. So shamanism, animism, the idea, very powerful word, nature. You see, nature comes from the word Neteru from ancient Egypt. And Neteru was the name for God. The Neteru were the nature spirits. So when we say nature today and separate it from our idea of God and say we're at war with nature, we're actually saying we're at war with God, the intelligence that creates leaves and flowers and birds and us.
now,
That's the teaching Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. It's sort of mind-boggling, isn't it?
Vast. So the Red Indian medicine wheel, and exactly the same with the Maya. The Maya have the cross. So you've got, they try and call it a sun symbol, or the wheel of Tyrannus, or the wheel of Odin. It's the same thing. They just found one at Stonehenge, 4,500 years old, a cross on a gold disc with dots round the outside, 60 of them. 60, which is the first number in the Bible. 666, 60. 60
Yes.
is the number for nature. Nature's numbers are the numbers of 2160 times 12, 25,920, all those numbers, which will blow people away if they're not used to it. So I don't do that too much. But all those numbers are there, and they were there in every society. The natural numbers of nature.
Mm.
And the cross reveals it.
Now, I've heard something, and admittedly, next to nothing about it, but I've heard something about something called prime number cross. Does that have anything to do with the Celtic cross, or is there a relationship there? And
I don't, that I can't answer. I don't know that. I haven't heard about the prime number cross.
I just heard of that just this week, and I started looking at it, and I thought, okay, I can't really get into this right now. I've got to get into the Celtic cross. So I didn't have a chance to really get too much information about it, but I'm not sure.
The problem is the labeling it, the wheel of Tyrannus, Odin's wheel, the Celtic cross. It's a useful instrument because it's a weighted circle on a crossbar, which allows you to take geometrical measurements.
That's right.
So therefore it can have all sorts of connotations. But the one that I discovered, which is the 1872 Dixon relics in the Queen's Chamber, which Robert Baval put me on to, that particular cross is far more sophisticated. It's a simple cross like the crucifix, but the crossbar is divided into degrees. So it's easier to handle and easier to close, easier not to show, if you see what I mean. So you can take the crossbar out the measure, and you can put it into a cross form and hang a plumb line from it. It's far more accurate. So even that was a development. Now that's on the front cover of my book. You look at, there's a faceless person in a cloak. And they have a staff in one hand with an Aries sign on the top, and hanging from their belt they've got a plumb bob and another wooden lat, which is the measuring rod. And anybody can use it that knows how to do it.
Now,
so that cross designed the pyramids, in my opinion, because it was found in the pyramids, and the pyramids reflect every natural number in degrees. People always talk about the length of the pyramid and the height of the pyramid, and they don't do it in degrees. It's really important, because you've got 180 degrees in each triangle. So each triangle of one pyramid is 720 degrees in total. And that is how many suns and moons go around the horizon. It's half a degree across for the moon, which is why we get eclipses, and half a degree across for the sun, which is the same reason we get eclipses. And there's 720 of them on a horizon circle. And that's embodied into the pyramid.
wow.
And you can only be that skilled in building that sort of a thing if you have got an instrument. It took Petrie, I think it was 14 or 15 instruments to measure the inside of the king's chamber. The cross does it as one instrument.
And
You see, what they did is, and I try to say to you, is they took the zodiac and the motions of the earth and the sun, and they made it into an instrument so as to measure them. So in other words, what was above is so below. Yeah. But
Yes.
the most important thing is that the first natural ruler that they used was a serpent skin.
Oh, that
Yeah.
is interesting.
Yeah, and because we used everything back then, a serpent skin, which they slough off as they grow, if you spread it out on a stick, it becomes a fantastic ruler. It's exponential because every living creature is built on a circle.
Wow.
So its little scales work perfectly for measuring. That's why the dragon in the northern hemisphere, or the serpent as it's called, is what we did. We were animistic, so we'd throw the animal into the sky. The first sign was Taurus, and Taurus was because we hunted the auroch. And the sign of Taurus came up on the horizon at the time that the auroch were migrating. So we knew when to hunt them. Because we ate them like the American Red Indian, we gave thanks to their spirit for sustaining us.
Wow. Now,
we have so lost our way, haven't we?
oh my goodness, it's unbelievable. Now, I'm thinking about you were mentioning earlier that the serpent eating its tail, and
Yep.
it reminds me of a book I read called Viking Serpent.
Yeah, I did the foreword for that. Harold Bolt.
Yes.
I did the foreword on that book for Harold because he'd found all these. Because the thing about the Vikings was that they were the serpent Christians that were thrown out of Ireland by St. Patrick. You see, it was
yes.
a disagreeable Christian sect. So they set their round churches with the serpent roofs and everything up in Norway. And then 200-300 years came back again and took Britain. And then when they finished taking Britain, they took France. Hence, the Normandy was what they were given. And then they conquered Britain again from both sides. And then they started building cathedrals and putting all the knowledge into it.
Right.
Okay, you can't, that's the shortened version of the idea of the serpents being thrown out of Ireland by St. Patrick. So they had serpents on the front of their boats, and they were expert navigators. They traveled to the Baltic, the Mediterranean, all over the place doing their trading, raping, and pillaging.
Did they really, or was that? I've read that they got kind of a bad rap.
Well, they were traders.
Yes.
And they were like all seafaring, and this is where I go back to logistics. You can't trade on a ship unless you can find your way. And if you're 3 miles offshore and there's no mountains, you can't see where you are. All it is sea and sky. You need to be able to use the stars. And you need to measure the stars. And you need to measure the stars within arc minutes. There are 60 arc minutes in a degree.
Yeah.
The Freemasons come from the Knight Templars, but the Freemasons built, at the end of the day, they were Masons. They built the holy churches. They had to know all this.
Yeah, they would have had to.
So in the inside of Rosslyn Chapel, I have a photograph of a cross on a tripod, exactly the same as it's a Mason's mark from when they built Rosslyn Chapel. It's a tiny cross on a tripod, and it shows exactly what my patent does. They didn't know.
Wow. Where is that in Rosslyn?
It's at the Leper Chapel down in the annex to the Leper Chapel. If you go through in and then look up to I guess you look up to the west. And it's right on the inside of Masons.
And was that something that you spotted, or was that something somebody told you about?
I was with Rob Bryden, who's deceased now, and he showed it to me when we were talking about the chapel and how it was built and what the hidden meanings were in it.
Wow, now. Isn't there a musical aspect to Rosslyn?
Yeah, it's collegiate. It's collegiate church. My name's Crichton, so my small family clan comes from that part. So Crichton Church is the next one over. That's a Collegiate church as well. It's absolutely beautiful. Now you have to work out the angles. So they didn't just work out how to do astrology and measure the outside the buildings. They needed to work out sonics, or if you like, how sound bounced. And that is about the same. It's about angles. You need to get the right curve to project the sound so that it hits the audience. If you get a very clever setup, you can speak very quietly with these things, like the Maya ballpark. So you can sit on the pyramid at one end and you can hear somebody whisper at the other, because
Yes.
the sound is set up perfectly. We've lost that. We're only just regaining that cleverness. So collegiate churches like Roslyn Chapel, Crichton Church, and the many others were all for about projecting sound in the right way, so it sounded beautiful within your ears, like a stereo, like stereo headphones.
Yeah, I've noticed that in a lot of churches in France.
Yeah.
They seem to have unusual acoustics. I remember one time we were up at this little church in Saint-Sever, which is, near the Rennes-le-Château area. And it's a very old, I believe it was originally a Celtic site.
Yeah.
And, but we were in there and we were singing. And when we stopped, the sound continued for the last note,
Yeah.
held for the longest time. It was spooky.
Beautiful. And designed to be so.
It was amazing, but I was like just flabbergasted by it, because I kept thinking, it's still going. It's still going. It's still going. And it seemed like forever. And I thought, how could it carry the sound that long?
Mathematics.
Apparently. Well, music is mathematics, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But being able to project the sound is mathematics too. You need to know at what degree it and how it bounces off the angle of a roof.
Yeah.
They're very, very, very clever, and they did it by simple systems like the one I'm explaining. There's nothing complex about the Celtic Cross, but it got a patent because there's nothing else like it on the planet.
It's amazing that it's just now coming back out, and thanks to you and your good work. That's wonderful.
It's very kind of you, but it is a bit of a burden.
I can imagine, but I'm sure it's also a labor of love.
It is a labor of love, and I'm totally fixed on it. OCD, I think they call it.
Well, it's really good, though. I mean, it's there are so many aspects that have been, either hidden deliberately or just lost through time.
It's deliberately hidden because it's how people earn their living.
Yes, well, it's wonderful.
Take it back to the reason why I did the patent. Nobody can take the cross away from me for 20 years, then it becomes public.
Yes.
But in those days, if they took the cross away from the person that used it, they could make the same living and deny that person a living. That's why it's a secret. It's not some great conspiracy about lizards with tails hanging out under skirts and things. It's got nothing. It's a simple thing that you protect. People in this world nowadays expect things for nothing. They download music for nothing that other people have worked on. They expect it for nothing. In the old days, people were probably the same, but they had to protect themselves, and they had to protect their knowledge. So it's simple. They hid it for commercial reasons.
Yeah.
In the same way that I've spent 10 years working on a system, a computer system, cloud-based, that manages people's work and time, and it's patented. And it's copyrighted to protect it so that nobody else can steal it from me.
Right.
And that's commercial. So we have to have two heads, We have to have a commercial head and a spiritual head. And if you've only got one, you're unbalanced.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
you're in big trouble.
Yeah, practical reasons for doing things is about earning a living. looking after your family or looking after your group or your country or whatever you decide is going to be. And you're going to protect it, sometimes with your life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like industrial secrets, you know.
And it is an industrial secret, and the cross was an industrial secret. It's simple, really. And now it's out. Why is it out now? Why am I being allowed to put it out? Because it's redundant.
But why now?
Well, because the timing's right.
Yes. I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, timing's right. And in our Western world, we've just absolutely spent everything we can on gratification, and it now sits in council or whatever, you know, tips and things like that. All the stuff that we bought and spoiled ourselves with up to 2007, 2008, and then our money all fell apart, and people are jaded with possessions. Now they need something a bit more, perhaps.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing.
I think so.
That is a good thing.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe that's why the timing's now. I don't know, but it's come at the right time, I'm sure.
Does it have anything to do, do you think, with the ending of the age of Pisces?
Yeah, and the idea, you see, people get confused about worlds. You know, the end of the world just means the end of an epoch. It doesn't mean the end of the planet. People, again, they get the words mixed up. So
yeah,
you've got the Christians fighting with the atheists over, you know, the world being made in 6,000 years. Well, that's true, because the world is actually an epoch. We started it when we built the pyramids. Beginning of the age of Taurus is 6,000 years ago. So we started it, this current epoch, if you like, started 6,000 years ago, but not the planet.
Right. Right.
You with me?
Yes, I am. You know, I was just thinking, you know, I think we're egotistical always when we think it's always about us and about our time, and that's probably why we always think the end of the world is coming, you know. That's it. Yeah. Rather than the end of an epoch.
Yeah, the end of the world begins and ends for one person every moment in our planet. A new person's born, another one passes away. That's the end of their world.
Yes. Yep. Well, my goodness, this is a lot of information to take in, and but it triggers so much. You know, it's been triggering thoughts all day in connections, and so far, when I've mentioned them to you, there seemed to be a connection, and that's why they were popping up for me. And I think, you know, that's something that we could all do is, you know, consider this material. And
you have a look at the Cathars next time you get to France and see why they were annihilated and excommunicated.
Oh my goodness, I may have to call you back privately. There's so many more things I did want to ask you about, but we're at the very end of the show, and I want to thank you, Crichton Miller, for enlightening us today. And I want to remind people that they can get your book, Golden Thread of Time, on your website, CrichtonMiller.com. That's CrichtonMiller, CrichtonMiller.com. And read for yourself what he's discovered. And we want to thank you for sharing with us tonight.
It's my great pleasure. And thank you very much for asking me to talk on your show.
Yes, and I want to thank our friend Court Lindell for helping to make the connection. And also, I want to thank MJ. So thanks very much, MJ, again, for helping us out and helping us get this information out to everyone. And thank you to our listeners and to the chat room. Good night, everybody.